Justice. How are you guys doing? I hope you and your mom are well. Sorry you couldn't come in this weekend. Your mom said that you guys had something to do or you were going somewhere. I can't remember which one it was. But today I'm going to do the lifetime warm-up with you. Okay, so we've been talking a little bit about this throughout our lessons for the last couple weeks. But today I'm actually going to get kind of deeper into the weeds with this stuff with you, and I'm going to give you a few different versions of the warm-up to play along to. So what I mean by that is I'm actually going to record several videos for this lesson. Okay, so this first video that I'm doing right now, basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to play through the lifetime warm-up along with the recording, so you'll be able to hear both. And I'm just going to periodically stop the recording and talk through what's about to happen, okay? So I'm not going to get so much into the stickings of everything because you already have them on the page that I gave you, but there are a couple of exercises within the warm-up that we haven't gotten to yet, and I'm going to use this video as an opportunity to talk about those things. So if you want to write the stickings down for those at the bottom of your page, please feel free to. I believe there's only one that you and I haven't talked about yet, so I'll bring that up once it comes up in the recording, okay? So before we even start, just want to talk about the grip one more time, okay? We haven't talked about that for a couple of weeks, so remember, we have different stages of how we hold the stick, right? We start with the thumb and forefinger in the first digit of the forefinger and the pad of the thumb, okay? You want as much of the thumb on the stick as possible, so you don't want the thumb to be sliding out to one side or the other. If it slides out too far to this end, the stick will slip and you end up holding onto it like a club, okay, or a baseball bat. That's not what we want. If you're holding it too far on the inside, then you'll probably just end up dropping the stick because you don't have enough support to keep it in your hand, okay? So, thumb and forefinger, and then we take all of the other first digits of the back three fingers and we touch the stick with them. You can see I can actually wiggle the stick, those, and then we're going to pull it into the line of our palm, okay? So straight down the arm, okay? And now what I do is, for some people, to have your hands completely flat, this is a little bit uncomfortable. So what you can do at that point is you just bring your arms in slightly. So now instead of them being totally flat, they're kind of at a 45-degree angle. You can see the space between my thumb and forefinger is now what's pointing towards the ceiling, okay? And what that does is that allows you to, one, get the stick more in line with your arm, and you don't have to stretch your wrist this way to get the stick in a straight line. When we hold the sticks with our palms totally flat, they kind of naturally do want to come out of the side of the hand a little bit, and so we have to control that with our fingers a little more, and some people will overcorrect for this by turning their wrist like this. So they put the stick in line with their arm by twisting their wrist this way. And that's actually, that position, like this, you can see that little bend in here. That's actually really not good for your wrist. So you want to avoid that. So by going from palms down completely flat to just twisting inward a little bit. So the thumb isn't completely up like this. It's just halfway in between both of those. Okay? And that's kind of the natural position that your arm likes to take anyway. If you let your arm hang loose at your side and just pick it up from your elbow, it's going to be at an angle. It's not going to come up completely flat, and it's definitely not going to come up upside down, right? So we're just taking the natural position that our hands assume when we lift our arms, like this, and dropping the stick inside. And then we're using these three fingers to keep the stick in that crease of our hand. Okay? Now, touching upon what we talked about last week about double strokes, I'm just going to talk about that very quickly. There's two ways that you can play double strokes. Okay? The first one being you drop the first note and you let gravity pull the second note down to the pad. So you're not actually playing the second note. Now the plus to doing this is you can play very relaxed this way because you're only playing one note and the second note's happening for free. You could even let it bounce more than twice if you just don't grab onto the stick. But the problem with this is that it's very hard to play even when we do this. And some people, when they start out playing double strokes, they have a really loud first note and then the second note is very, very quiet because they basically throw the stick too hard for the first note, and then that second note has no chance of reproducing that kind of volume. So the way that you can bounce your double strokes and get them to sound more even is you just throw them gently. Okay, you don't have to put a lot of force into it to get the stick to bounce. So even if I throw the stick from just this high, it will bounce. Okay, so we don't have to throw it from a very high, and we don't have to put much force into it either. We can just let the sticks bounce. And because I'm not throwing the first strokes super hard, those strokes are pretty even sounding. Now, this is what it would sound like if I did throw them too hard. That's not even at all. It's not a bad sound. That's something we could actually use on the drum set, but it's not an even double stroke roll. As opposed to okay, so what we're working on is the evenness of our doubles. Now the second way that you can play double strokes, what we talked about last week, is you can actually control both of those strokes. So now you're not relying on gravity to produce the second stroke. And what you're doing is you're spreading the load of that double stroke across two different muscle groups. Okay? So the first one being dropping the stick with your wrist and opening the hand. Opening the fingers specifically. So now you can see the stick is out on all of my first digits, and what I can do from here is I'm going to keep the wrist completely still, and I actually recommend that you try this, holding on to your wrist. Okay? What you're going to do is for that second stroke, you're actually going to play this with your back three fingers, these guys. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're just going to pull the stick back into the palm of your hand. It's going to bring the tip of the stick down and it will hit the pad. Now I'm doing it in the air, but you'll see how the stick travels when I do this. No wrist action. It's just all fingers. Now if I bring it over to the pad, watch my wrist. It's not producing that stroke. I can hold on to my wrist and still do this just by opening and closing my fingers. Okay? So the idea is the wrist sets up the first stroke by opening the hand. That's one muscle group that you've used already. And then the second muscle group is your fingers. So if we want this to be efficient and to really spread that load across those two muscle groups so that they don't get tired, we have to make sure that when we pull the fingers in, we're not also pushing down again with the wrist. You can see my knuckles go down when I do that. What we want is this, where it's just the fingers controlling that. So by doing that, we're making sure that each muscle group only has to play one stroke. But if you open the hand with the wrist and then grab with your fingers and push down with your wrist, then you're kind of killing the point of all of this. The idea is the wrist plays the first stroke and the fingers play the second. And from there, you can either keep the stroke down, which would set you up for a soft stroke, or you can delay how quickly you pull the stick into your palm and pull it into your palm after the stick impacts the pad, and you can get the stick to bounce again. So if I want the stick to stay down, I'm going to catch the stick right after it hits the pad, and I'm going to keep my wrist down. If I want it to bounce up, I'm going to catch it just a little bit later than that, so the stick will have some time and it will still have space to bounce up. So you can see, I can use the wrist and fingers, and I can get both strokes to bounce. And later on, we can actually use this to play single strokes. That's a little more advanced, but that's something that we will talk about eventually. Okay? So keep those things in mind. Practice both ways of playing double strokes. Okay? They're both useful in their own way. Okay? Using the fingers will allow you to control each note very, very accurately, because you're not surrendering to gravity pulling the stick down. So you are 100% in control of the movement of the stick when you use that technique. But when you do allow the sticks to bounce, after you practice that for a while, you can develop that to the point that it's almost equally as accurate and powerful as the other one, but it does take more practice to control that one. So that's very important to iterate on. The more control that we surrender, meaning the less our body is having to do with emotion, the more time it's going to take for us to really get control over that. Okay, so when it comes to bouncing the sticks, you have to learn how much energy you need to put into the stick to get it to bounce to a certain height. So if you want the stick to bounce all the way up to the top, there's a certain amount of force that you're going to need to learn to put into the stick to do that. And there's also a certain amount of force that's just going to be too much, where it's going to go past the point of straight up, where the stick travels farther back, right? That's too much. And if I don't put enough into the stick, then the stick won't bounce high enough. So this is really beneficial to learn how to do this, because just by playing double strokes in this way, you can really teach your hands how to manage the amount of force that you're putting into the drum, okay, which is super important if you want to do anything other than playing super loud, which we do, but we can also play very soft on the instrument, okay, and that's equally important. All right, so I'm going to end this explanation portion of the video, and I'm going to jump into the lifetime warm-up, okay? So let's do that right now.